Hey everybody, how y'all doing out there? So in this video I thought we would take a look at two very popular bass rigs. Now I imagine that you guys out there, you beginners out there, are starting to get pretty proficient with your fishing, and you'll want to start to use a more species specific lures and baits, right? Right? Okay, good. So two of the most popular rigs to use for bass fishing, and they can be used for, in some cases walleye, depending on the time of year, and even pike fishing. But they were mainly developed for bass anglers, and that is the Carolina rig and the Texas rig. So a lot of people look at these rigs and they say, "Oh, what's the difference?" They look identical. Well, they're not. They do have their differences, and we're going to go through that. I'm going to show you the differences on how they are made up, and also explain to you when and where's the best conditions to use each lure, so you have a little bit of an understanding. Now, I'm not going to be assembling one in this video. This is purely just a quick overview of both of them. I'm going to do another video where I'll show you how to actually assemble both rigs and how to put the plastic baits on the hooks and all that good stuff. All right, so why don't we get down to it? Okay, so before I talk about the individual rig, the Texas rig and the Carolina rig, let's just do a summary of the terminal tackle that is needed to create them. They both use the same. The only difference is the placement of certain things on the Carolina rig versus the Texas rig, okay? So what you're going to need a leader material or trace material, whatever you want to call it, usually either, some nylon line or a monofilament or fluorocarbon. I recommend you use a fluorocarbon simply because of its durability and the fact it's got a very low visibility in the water. You'll need a micro swivel to attach your leader to the main line, simply just to eliminate twist. Twist can be annoying if it happens. It can damage the line, so I do recommend a swivel for the attachment of the leader material to the main line, and it will help with the swim pattern itself of the lure. You will also need an inline weight of some sort. That's a fishing weight that's actually thread onto the line. And you can use a bullet weight, or you can use an egg weight, something that threads onto the line. All right. You will need a bead, plastic or glass, maybe two, depends on how you want to set it up. You'll need at least one, and you'll need a special type of fishing hook. You're going to need one of these. You're either going to use the offset worm hook, as you see here on the right hand side, or on the left side here, this is called a Nico hook. And the Nico hook has a little plastic barb on the back shank, which helps hold your plastic bait in place on the hook. Now, plastics are notorious, well, as is even cut bait, sliding up over the eye of the hook onto your main line. Though these hooks that I just mentioned were designed specifically for the use of plastics for this application. So they sit firmly on the hook and won't slide up it. And that's important. That I know some guys like to use a regular hook. They've got it worked out. But hey, this is what these hooks were designed for in the first place. Okay, so offset worm hook or a Nico hook. And of course, you're going to need your plastic bait. That could be your Senko worms, it could be your creature baits, could be crawdaddies, whatever. These are the long plastic baits, and as I said before, these rigs are meant for the plastic baits. All right, so now let me introduce you to the first rig, the Texas rig. It is named for the state of Texas. It is believed that in around the late 1950s, let's say, that the boys that fished down on Lake Tyler started developing this type of rig. What they were doing was that plastics had been developed about 10 years before. And apparently this lake is very weedy, so to prevent their rigs from getting snagged up, they were turning their hooks into the body of the plastic lure. And this made them more weedless, and it was easier to cast and retrieve without getting snagged up. So this is how this rig got its start down in Texas there, and hence the name, the Texas rig. It was actually initially called the Do Nothing rig because really it didn't do anything. You just threw it out and kind of trolled it in and hoped that a fish latched onto it. So it got dubbed the Do Nothing rig. But anyway, let's take a look at how this is set up. So here you can see we have our main line where we have a micro swivel attached at one end, and then that is attached to the end of a leader. Leader can be either monofilament or fluorocarbon. I would recommend fluorocarbon simply because it's much more durable and it's also virtually invisible underwater. We go down to the end here. We've got our bullet weight or our egg weight. Remember, it has to be an inline weight. You want one that slides up and down the line, not one that is clamped onto the line. Then we have the buffer bead. Sometimes this is called a fisheye bead, but it's a buffer bead. It helps protect the knot on the hook here. Has a couple of other uses as well. We'll go back to that in a minute. Then we have the offset hook. And then, of course, we have our soft plastic lure. Now, going back to that buffer bead, not only does it provide protection for the knot on the offset hook, it also adds a flash of color to the lure. And that can be very important, especially if you're fishing in waters that are stained or, are not very clear. That flash of color can mean everything. And it's recommended that you use the high vis colors. You use your oranges, your reds, your yellows, that type of thing. In addition to being visible, making the lure visible, we have the inline weight, which is in front of it, which slides up and down the line. And when it slides up and down, it's going to hit that glass or plastic bead. And then you're going to get like a clicking sound. So now you've got a noise attraction added to this rig as well. So not just a visual, you also have a noise attraction added too, which can be very beneficial when trying to attract hungry fish to your lure. Now take note of how this hook is inserted into the plastic bait. Now I'm going to go through this in much more detail in another video, but just look, you see it's threaded through the nose, comes out, is turned around and put back into the body with the tip just buried underneath the surface of the plastic on the top. This is what makes this lure weedless. There's no point sticking out of your plastic bait that can snag on weeds or whatever's in the water because it's just buried down, pressed down into the plastic, and so you just skim by these things. And also the placement of that bullet weight helps kind of bulldoze through things. It'll push the weeds apart. It'll help bounce off any obstructions that are in the water, like submerged logs or even rocks or pilings and that type of thing. This is why this is an excellent weedless lure to use for bass fishing. We all know bass like to be around cover. This is the one to use for that application than that type of fishing. All right, so that is your Texas rig. Now let's go to the next one. Let's go to the Carolina rig. So here's the Carolina rig. It looks very, very similar to the Texas rig. No wonder people get confused and mixed up. Well, do you notice the difference? Well, the only difference is that basically your inline weight and your buffer bead are on the main line just above the micro swivel instead of being down in front of the offset hook. Now, why is that? Well, it's because the application for this rig is a little bit different. You're still going to use your offset hook and your plastic lure, but the Carolina rig is designed to be kind of dragged across the bottom of the lake. The weight holds it down, but yet the plastic bait itself will kind of float just above the surface of the bottom and kind of bounce around, and you can just pull it along, and any fish that's down close to the bottom, feeding bass, spring walleye, whatever, hopefully they're going to go for it. But yeah, that's really the only difference between the two, is that the weight and buffer bead are in a different location because you're going to use this one for dragging along the bottom. It's not ideal really for really weedy areas. It can get very easily tangled because you could have quite a distance on your leader between the weight and the hook. So you don't want to use it in weeded areas. Although the hook is still inserted in the back of the plastic bait, so it doesn't snag, it's not as weedless as your Texas rig. Now, the Carolina rig was initially developed by anglers who were in South Carolina who fished for striped bass because they had a tendency to be closer to the bottom. But it was discovered that it's actually an excellent rig for bass fishing and even walleye fishing. And Bill Dance, you've seen him on YouTube, right? The clumsy, the most accident-prone angler there is. He was, of course, a professional angler. He actually used the Carolina rig in the 1973 Bassmaster Classic, and he won it using this rig, or a version of this rig. This rig also had the name of the ball and chain rig before it became officially known as the Carolina rig because of all the paraphernalia that's behind the weight. So the ball and chain rig, yeah, it's been around since about 1973, something like that. So it's not as old as a Texas rig, but yeah, it's still just as effective. All right. So now you know the difference between the two, and you know when to use them. Okay? So in my next video, I will actually do some rig up a Carolina rig and rig up a Texas rig and show you how to put that worm hook through the soft bait, or I may not use a Nico hook. We'll see if we can get them, but I'll show you how to put the worm, the plastic bait onto the worm hook. All right? So look forward to that video, and then in the meantime, this is Sharon saying bye-bye for now.